I can't share your praise for Anna Kasparian because, she had plenty of opportunities to realize what was right. And she only really changed her mind when it affected her personally.
Agreed.
And I don't think you get plaudits for that. I'm sorry. I don't think you get a round of applause just because you got assaulted and then your friends weren't nice to you about it. And now you realize that maybe your friends are dicks.
Hold on.
I'm sorry.
Milo,
I'm sorry.
hold on.
I don't think you get...
Actually, I disagree with this. I assume they're being a little facetious, but it's a point that I see come up fairly often enough to address it, so I want to address it. I disagree with this because it is an unfortunate reality, but a reality nonetheless, of the human condition that very often we have to suffer in order to change. This is where the idea of hitting rock bottom before you quit drinking alcohol or quit doing drugs or whatever the case may be, this is where that idea comes from. Because very often, in order to get us to wake up, whether it's from our own vices, our own addictions, or our indoctrination, our brainwashing, very often in order to get us to snap out of it, so to speak, we have to hit rock bottom, so to speak, or have suffering. Now, to be clear, I have no love lost for Anna Kasparian. I think that she's an intelligent woman, but I do not think that she is on her way to becoming a conservative. I think that she has just slightly recovered from her Trump derangement syndrome. Her brain is a little less broken than it was when she was suffering from Trump derangement syndrome.
Donald Trump was running for president, and then after he got elected as president. And I am 1,000,000% guilty of honestly allowing him to kind of break my brain for a little bit, because I saw him as such a significant threat.
But I don't think she's like an ally to conservatives. But that said, I am going to defend her wake-up moment, if that's indeed what it is. I still doubt that that's what it is, because it doesn't matter what causes you to wake up. It doesn't matter what causes you to walk away, as long as you walk away. And very often, the thing that is going to cause you to walk away is going to be your own suffering. Sorry to say it, I don't want people to suffer, but that's the reality. That's what caused me to walk away. Prior to 2020, obviously I had suffered in life. I've had my fair share of suffering. My family's had our fair share of suffering. But before 2020, I had never been able to directly connect my suffering back to Democrat policies. And in 2020, that is all I could do. It was like slapping me in the face that you are suffering because of Democrat policies. I was suffering because of the response to COVID. And more importantly, because it's not just about me, I was one of millions of Americans who were suffering because of the response to COVID, who were going to survive COVID, because it was clear at that point, it was clear very early on, but people forget this, that a lot of people were going to survive COVID. But were we going to survive it emotionally, financially, mental health-wise, et cetera, because the response to COVID was crazy? Were we going to survive that? And I was suffering because of that. And I could not help but connect that to Democrat policies. And that was my light bulb moment. And someone on the outside could say, well, it took you too long, or it took your own suffering, or it took something like the pandemic 2020 to wake you up. Why did it take so much? Why did it take that? Why did it take you so long? But you know what? It doesn't matter, because I walked away and I've never looked back. And not only that, but I have spoken out publicly and I've become a rather effective voice for the other team. It really doesn't matter what gets you there, as long as you get there. Anna Kasparian, she lives in LA. What was allegedly her wake-up moment, again, I don't think that she's not a Democrat, I just think she's a little more sane now, was that she was unfortunately assaulted by a homeless man. She was out walking her dog at dusk, I believe it was, so it wasn't like late at night. She bent over to tie her shoe, I believe, and a homeless man came up and thrust himself behind her. Now, obviously, it could have been so much worse, but that is pretty bad, and that is pretty harrowing as a woman. I also have been chased by homeless people living in LA, and that's not what caused me to wake up and walk away, because by this point, I had already walked away from the Democrat Party. But there was one instance in particular, and I'll tell you what, this really does shock you awake if you're not already there. I was out walking. It was during COVID. I was walking to a park near me. I was about 3 blocks away because I would go on these walks. I didn't have a car at the time, obviously didn't have a job. And so I would go on these walks just to get fresh air and some sunshine and some exercise. And I was walking my normal route towards an intersection that I was going to cross to go towards the park, which was like in a little bit of a divot away from the main street. And I could feel it before I saw her. I could feel her zero in on me. When you can sense that someone is watching you, that something has now shifted in the air and there's like trouble brewing, and you can just feel when someone locks in on you, that's what I felt. And then out of the corner of my eye, I saw her zeroing in on me and like walking across the street, walking parallel to me to keep up with me. And she was yelling something that was indistinguishable at that moment. She was obviously a homeless person, because you can tell. I kept minding my own business. I had earbuds in. And I thought it was going to stop because, frankly, when you live in LA, you get a little used to crazy people around. And oftentimes there's people yelling or talking to themselves. And more often than not, nothing comes of it. I thought foolishly that it was going to stop. I got to the intersection where I was going to cross, and stupidly I crossed. So I was crossing more towards her. I wasn't looking for trouble, but I really just had never been in this situation before. And I thought that it was going to stop. I thought it was broad daylight. In retrospect, I wouldn't have done that now, but that's what I did. I crossed the intersection. She was still locked in on me. She was still across the street because it was, like I said, a little bit of a divot, like an alley away from the main street. But again, it was during the day. And I started walking faster towards the park. She started walking faster on the opposite side of the street, but now we were closer together. I started running. She started running. She was still screaming. And all I could really make out is that she was calling me a white B word. And I made it to the park, which was, like I said, 3 blocks away. There were people there because it was during COVID and I guess people had nothing else to do. Nobody stopped to help me. Not one person stopped to help me, even though it was clear that I was in distress, that she was a little crazed, that she was yelling racial epithets. And I get it. I get that you don't want to get involved in someone else's drama, and these people don't know me from Adam. Did I do something to this woman? I get it. But I'll tell you what, as a woman, minding her own business, just out for a walk, not drunk, not out at night, not dressed a certain way, just literally minding your own business. And you're in that situation, and I'm not here looking for a fight. I'm not prepared for a fight. I'm not a fighter. And I have this woman who I don't know what she's on, but she's clearly angry, running towards me at full speed. And that is, and no one's going to help me. That is like a life-changing moment. And I don't mean to make it more than it is, but it's a life-changing moment, because that's a moment where you realize what could happen in that situation and how vulnerable you really are. And eventually I got to a point where I just stopped in the middle of the baseball diamond because I had nowhere else to run. In front of me, there was a hill that went up to houses, and I don't know. I turned around and I stopped and I said, "What do you want?" And she said, "Were you looking at him?" Meaning, I guess, the man that she was with, as in, were you checking him out? And I just said, no, because I wasn't looking at anybody. I didn't even really know what the hell she was talking about. And she said, "Good, you're nothing, witch," with the B, and walked away. Now, it could have ended up so much worse than that. I get it. But again, that is a moment that changes you. I feel for Anna Kasparian. Now, at that point, I had already walked away from the Democrat Party, but boy, golly, if I had not already walked away from the Democrat Party, I think I might have, because again, these are directly related back to Democrat policies. Democrat policies encourage people camping out on the street. They encourage people out of their minds, out on the street. They encourage people stealing if it's under $950. They encourage criminals. We had the DA, Gascon, we're just catching and releasing people out back onto the streets. Democrat policies encourage this. And then when you call the police, which I have called on numerous occasions because of instances like this was the worst one, but there's been times when there have been different people on drugs in my backyard or in my apartment unit or out on my car, things like that. When you call the police in LA, they don't come. They don't come. I'm sure it's not intentional. I'm sure they're just too busy, but they don't freaking come. This is directly related back to Democrat policies. And it doesn't matter how indoctrinated you are. It doesn't matter how much TDS you have. When you experience this, like what Anna Kasparian experienced, which was, I'd argue, worse, obviously, than what I experienced. But when you experience things like this, it can wake you up. It can shift you. And yeah, it is your own suffering. It might seem a little selfish, but unfortunately, there are very few things that can actually penetrate through your brainwashing, and your own suffering is one of them. It doesn't mean you're definitely going to wake up, but suffering can sure help, because that's one of the things that can penetrate through the brainwashing. Listen, I'm always going to defend this. I'm not saying blindly trust people who say they're conservatives or suddenly decide to criticize the Democrat Party when before they have been the arm of the Democrat Party. But I am saying that your immediate reaction can't always be, they're a grifter, they're out for money, they're lying, they're just shifting whichever way the wind blows, or they had to wait until something happened to them because they're inordinately selfish. No. If someone genuinely wakes up, proceed with caution, but if they genuinely wake up, you welcome them. Doesn't matter how they got there.